Naftali Bennett is not just right-wing, he is a religious settler. He is also a murderer. He has admitted on television that he has killed many Arabs, as he said. He doesn't call Palestinians, he just calls them Arabs. And when they insisted and said, how many Arabs did you kill? He said, very, very many. But it doesn't matter because it's okay. This is what a prime minister of a country is telling the citizens of his country, that it's okay to kill Arabs, and therefore it doesn't matter if he killed 1 or 100, it's all the same.
Israeli occupation army and settlers' aggression on the Palestinian people has been on rise, with no hope that such aggression is coming to an end, as Israel is determined to continue its military occupation of the Palestinian land, believing in its military might and nothing else. To talk more about that, I have with me via Skype from London, Professor Haim Bresheeth. He is a filmmaker, photographer, and a professor at the School of African Oriental Studies in London University. And he is the author of a very famous book on Israeli army, an army like no other. Welcome to the program, Mr. Haim. And I start my question about the army like no other. We see how the Israeli occupation army aggression against the Palestinians is on rise. Just while I'm speaking with you now, the Israeli army killed the 20-year-old Palestinian boy in Nakba refugee camp in Jericho, and his family is laying him to rest right now. So if we talk about the context of the Israeli army killing of the Palestinians now and during the time of the Nakba, any connection you see?
Well, the Nakba was a result of the Israeli army conducting massacres up and down across Palestine, as you well know. People know about Deir Yassin, but they don't know about the others. And there were tens of those massacres. And those were not mistakes. Those were planned to frighten the Palestinian population so that it will run and leave their homes. This was done in big cities as well as in small ones. Haifa was a very, very bad example. Lidda is another one. Ramla, and of course Jaffa. All these places were bombed and attacked, most of them even before the 14th of May 1948. And so they didn't wait for the Arab armies to attack Israel on the 15th of May. They attacked Jaffa a few weeks before, for example, and Haifa as well, and Tiberias and so on. So this was ethnic cleansing planned. The plan was called Plan D or Plan Dalet, and it was about basically reducing the Palestinian population as much as possible. Indeed, it was successful, and they have not just killed more than 10,000 people. Most Palestinian historian thinks that it's nearer the 15,000 that died in the Nakba. But 2/3 of the Palestinian people lost their homes because they were ejected and expelled by the Israeli army. So what is happening today? Surprise, surprise, it's something very similar. Israel is still trying to get the Palestinians out of Palestine. And it's trying different methods. These methods are quite successful. Since 1967, almost 350,000 Palestinians have left Palestine. Most of them were Christian Palestinians. Because they were more successful on the whole going to Western countries like Canada, United States, some countries in the South America, and of course in Europe, Australia, they are more welcome than Muslim Palestinians. So when you attack a population for decades, some of them, if they are successful in getting a visa, will go and leave because they want to live. I don't blame them for leaving Palestine because, you know, if I was bombed and attacked and oppressed and had no rights in my own country, like Palestinians don't, then I might want to save the life of my family and my children, myself, and go to another country. So this is the calculation behind what Israel is doing. Like in 1948, when it was successful, now they're trying the same trick again.
Yes,
and they know that they are
Mr.
safe.
Haim, concerning the Israeli occupation aggression against the Palestinians and the Israeli scheme to get all the Palestinians out of Palestine, we have two types of violence today against the Palestinians. The violence by the Israeli formal army, the Israeli occupation government army, and the Israeli settlers. Do you think that there is coordination between the Israeli army and the settlers for this violence, or we can draw a line between both settlers and army?
This is like the left foot and the right foot. Of course, there is coordination. The Israeli army is always supporting the settlers in whatever they're doing. They are arming them, they're training them, they are protecting them when they commit their crimes, you know. But the Israeli army itself commits crimes every day. You talked about one Palestinian boy who was shot today. There is hardly a day that some people are not killed. Women, children, old people, young people, it doesn't matter. Palestinians are allowed to be killed by the Israeli society. And so I don't think that you should separate the actions of the army from the actions of the settlers. Sometimes they send the settlers because it's easier for them. Sometimes they send the army. When the settlers go, the army also goes. So I think these are all the settlements are basically settlements, armed settlements. They're settlements of armed occupation. They're all illegal according to the UN resolutions. And Israel knows that it's safe in doing it because the United States is protecting them. It's not protecting other countries when they occupy, like it's not protecting Russia when it's occupied Ukraine, but it has been protecting Israel since the 60s, and it continues to do so and break the law itself, break the UN resolution itself. So I wouldn't separate the activities of the settlers as if they are out of control. Israel is always claiming we can't control the settlers, but this is just a ploy. This is just a trick.
Yes, and Mr. Haim, you mentioned the Russian-Ukrainian crisis compared to how the international community or the Western governments in particular are handling the Palestinian cause and the Ukrainian-Russian crisis now. And we all see and watch how they support the Ukrainian fight against the Russian forces. They call them heroes, defending the land, defending the dignity of the nation. But when it comes to the Palestinians, even at the level of stone throwers, children throwing stones at the Israeli army, they are portrayed as violent people, even terrorists. Now, after this is exposed to the world, what happens in Ukraine compared to Palestine, do you think the equation would change how the Western government view the Palestinian fight for justice and the freedom, or is going to be the same?
I think it depends on us. I think it depends on the leadership of the Palestinians. I think it depends on the resistance. And I think it depends on people who support the Palestinians, like the many hundreds of thousands in Britain and many others across the world. If we make the case that justice is not justice until it is applied to everyone in the same way, then we might win. I'm not saying we're sure to win, because the governments in the West are all supportive of Israeli apartheid. They're all supportive of Israeli war crimes. They never applied any sanctions to Israel whatsoever. In the 74 years that Israel is conducting war crimes, it never suffered a single sanction. No boycott, no sanction, nothing. The UN might decide that Israel should return the refugees, for example, like in 1949. Did Israel return the refugees? And when it decided not to do what the UN asked it to do, was it punished? No. There were no sanctions. So they're totally safe. So I don't think that governments are going to change the position until people in Britain, in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in Europe, go into the streets and say, we demand justice for Palestine. And they did that with South Africa. In the 70s, I was involved in this, and I remember very well how many demands to end South African apartheid were necessary to turn the governments against South African apartheid. It took 30 years. This has not happened in the same way because the investment those governments have in Israel is much greater than they had in South Africa. So I think we can see that what will be needed is an enormous pressure of the population in Europe, in the United States, in South America, everywhere, on their governments so that they change their position and apply sanctions to any occupation. And after all, the Russian occupation was not even a week old, and sanctions were applied. So why, after 74 years of illegal occupation and illegal actions like not allowing people back into their homes against UN resolutions, are no sanctions applied to Israel?
Yeah.
So I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I'm saying all of us, but all of us who believe in justice have to act in order for the governments to change their position. Otherwise, they would not do it.
Yeah, Mr. Haim. We also watch how the Israeli aggression stepped up against the Palestinians, mainly in occupied Jerusalem, attacking the worshippers in Al-Aqsa mosques, and also the Christian Palestinian worshippers in the Church of the Sepulchre just 2 days ago. And at the same time, we see how they restrict Palestinians' access to the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, in southern occupied West Bank. And the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas had warned many times that Israel is turning the conflict into a religious conflict. Do you think that this current Israeli government has this idea, this element to take us into a new circle of the conflict, religious conflict?
I think it's a total conflict. It's not just a religious conflict. It's a total conflict on all levels. And remember, this is the first time, Osama, that Israel is headed by a religious man. This has never happened before. Naftali Bennett is not just right-wing. He is a religious settler. He is also a murderer. He has admitted on television that he has killed many Arabs, as he said. He doesn't call Palestinians he just calls them Arabs. Yeah. And when they insisted and said, how many Arabs did you kill? He said, very, very many. But it doesn't matter because it's okay. This is what a prime minister of a country is telling the citizens of his country, that it's okay to kill Arabs, and therefore it doesn't matter if he killed 1 or 100, it's all the same. So that's one point I wanted to make. The other point is this: the religious families of the families of religious Jews in Israel are very large families. Mm-hmm. So the percentage of the religious Jews in Israel is growing up all the time. And now it's about 52%. That means that there can never be a democratic move to free Palestine in Israel. There never could be, but now the numbers even are against it. Not just the politics is against it, but the numbers are against it because the religious people, most religious Jews, not all, but most religious Jews are anti-Palestinian. They are supportive of apartheid, supportive of oppression, and now they even have their own prime minister, and they have parties in the Knesset who are devoted to removing the Palestinians. They are devoted to transfer. Yeah. So I think that they are using the religion because the religious people are a majority. So it's a very easy thing to do for them. So by making the conflict also a religious conflict, they have immediately the support of a majority of the Israeli population. So this is the reason why this is happening now, because now most Israeli Jews are religious, and this percentage of religious in the country will only go up. Yeah, because the non-religious have 1 or 2 children. The religious families have between 7 and 12. So that percentage is just going up all the time. Therefore, a political solution from inside Israel is just not possible anymore. If it ever was possible, I don't believe it was, but if it ever was possible, now it is numerically impossible.
Yes, and my final question to you, Mr. Haim, you said that Israel is afraid of peace rather than of war. How do we understand this statement?
Right, okay, this is easy to understand, unfortunately. Yeah. Sad, very sad and tragic. But Israel has fought since 1948 more wars than the rest of the world together. You know that because they fought these wars mainly against Arabs and, of course, against the Palestinians. And the Palestinians have no army. They didn't have an army in 1948. They couldn't defend themselves. And the Arab countries couldn't defend them either in the end. We saw the result. And Israel is very practiced at war. Now, that's not to say that the Israeli army always wins wars. You know that in 1973, they almost lost the war. Mm-hmm. You also know that in 1982 and in 2006, the 2 times they moved into Lebanon, they could not win. Militarily, they could not win. They could not win in 1982. They destroyed Beirut. They destroyed the south. They killed 20 plus thousand people in Lebanon. Think about the numbers, yeah? They've destroyed Palestinian infrastructure in Lebanon. They forced Arafat out through the Americans, but they did not win the war militarily. They couldn't win it. In 2006, they actually lost the war. They lost the war with 120,000 soldiers the same size of the army that the Russians put into Ukraine, which is about 100 times larger than the area in Lebanon. So what I'm saying is the Israelis are very practiced in war. They know how to operate. They don't know how to win, especially against small organizations with great fighting skills like Hezbollah or in Gaza. You know, they can't win against Hamas. How many times have they attacked Gaza? How many times did they bomb Gaza? They bombed the universities. They bombed the schools. They bombed the hospitals. They bombed the media towers in Gaza. They destroy Gaza again and again. They destroy Beirut again and again. But they cannot win the war. Because for them to win the war is to get rid of the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. Now, why are they frightened of peace? Because if they are not winning wars, they should look for peace. Now, that is, I think, too simplified. They have never had real peace with any Arab country.
Yes.
Real peace, I mean. Real peace. Peace of peace of equals, yeah? I've been in Egypt many times. I go there, I have friends there. I love Egypt. And I know that Israelis in Egypt are only going to Sharm el-Sheikh or, Dahab or places like that. They don't really connect culturally with the Arab countries that they have supposedly peace agreements, yeah? The process of normalization has gone it hasn't gone very far. That means they sell the Gulf countries a lot of arms, and they use the Gulf countries in all kind of ways. Even Saudi Arabia, though they don't have an agreement yet with Saudi Arabia, but they have an agreement with most other countries, yeah? But the Arab countries never had a problem with having peace. In 2002, all the Arab world said to Israel, let us sign a peace agreement and help bring peace to Palestine and the Palestinians. The Israelis didn't even answer the letter. They did not react. They said it doesn't require a reaction, because peace, real peace, is really frightening for them, because what it would mean is they would have to stop the attacks. They would have to accept all the Palestinians living in Palestine are going to stay there. And not only that, there will be a demand, which they will have to consider, at least, of the Auda, the return of Palestinians from the diaspora to their homes, which, the UN, after all, demanded that in 1949 and never went back on it. This is still the case. It should happen. So they don't want to face having to divide Palestine between themselves and the Palestinians.
Yes.
The current state is they control the whole of Palestine. Between the river and the sea, there is only one army. This is a very strong army. This is a very rich army, and it's the most important institution in Israel. There is no other more important institution in Israel.
Yeah.
So they are frightened of peace because it's an unknown, while war and fighting they know about.
Yeah. Haim Bresheeth, professor at the School of Oriental African Studies in London University, activist against colonialism and Zionism. It has been a great pleasure having you on our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching, and from me, Osama Nazal, wish you a nice time.